Hello, beautiful friends. I'm Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, and it is my joy to welcome you to another episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and hopefully fall asleep. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. During the daytime hours, I love getting to help you connect with your angels and deepen into your mystical and magical gifts. And I do this through angel sessions, soul mentoring, in a variety of classes. You can learn more about my work at illuminatingsouls.com and also find me on Facebook at Illuminating Souls. But in this moment, I am here to bring forward the love of the angels and to read you a bedtime story. And my hope is the combination of the two will help to bring you an infusion of comfort and love, and this will help lull you to sleep. So I invite you to take a deep breath in and out. And the angels are already here. And you know, one of the things that I have learned over the years is one of the side effects sometimes of experiencing higher energy fields is they often put us to sleep. And I'll share a little story with you about it. Some of you have heard this already. In 2006, my husband and I were blessed to attend several days of teachings with the Dalai Lama when he was in Los Angeles. It was quite a remarkable experience. And one of the things that happened for me was when other monks and teachers were talking, I was present and awake. And as soon as the Dalai Lama started teaching, I would fall asleep. And I had so much judgment on myself. I thought, what is happening? I so wanted to be present to what he was teaching. And a dear friend of mine, who's very wise, was with us. And as I was sharing my frustration with her, she said, "It is because his energy field is so high. And by you getting sleepy, it is the best way for you to receive his energy." And I thought that was quite a remarkable reflection. Because you know what was so interesting about that was one evening of the teachings, he did a public address. It was several thousand people. And the energy and the content was very different than what he was bringing forward in the teachings he was doing during the daytime. And you know what? I stayed awake. I was engaged and interested, and my mind was alert. And yet, during the daytime, when he was bringing forward the Buddhist teachings, I would fall asleep. So this was my first experience with this kind of phenomenon. I experienced it again when I first started listening to Abraham Hicks. When Jerry and Esther Hicks were speaking as themselves, I was alert and listening to everything they had to say. And then when Esther started channeling Abraham, I zonked right out. And this happens quite often when I am channeling Josephus and the Wisdom Council and the angels. It's a group of angelic guides that I channel. And sometimes Josephus even says, when we're doing an angel circle, if you start to get sleepy when we are speaking, it is not because we are boring. It is because you are receiving higher frequencies of energy. And the most graceful way for you to receive the healing and the acclimation is by resting. So in some ways, bringing forward the angels for you in this context is just such a beautiful marriage, because you get to fall asleep while they're here. Their energy is so beautiful and loving, and they are helping to calibrate these energies to support you, not only so that you can fall asleep, but this energy is also seeded with blessings to support you in your waking life as well. So with that, I invite you, if you have not already cozied on up, to snuggle in and breathe deeply in and out, allowing your body and your mind to rest. This is your time. You have permission to disconnect from everything that has been clamoring for your attention. And you get to have this time now. Get to come into this sanctuary of sleep where you are held and loved in the heart of God. So beautiful angels on high, we are so grateful that you are here with us in this moment. And we can feel the waves of gratitude that you have for this opportunity for us to be with you right now. Angels, I ask that you infuse this broadcast with love, that everyone who hears this message feels the comfort and compassion and light you are streaming in service to our highest and best goods. Angels, we ask that you lift anything that feels like a burden, because what feels heavy to us likely feels as light as a feather to you. Please help bring solutions of grace and ease forward to whatever we are seeking to create. Angels, we ask that you bring forward blessings that help each one of us remember who we are in the true brightness of our spirit. May our paths be paved with blessings. May we find heart-centered community with people who feel like home. May our souls feel inspired by the beauty of our lives. And if for any reason we are not feeling that right now, we ask that you seed this into the days and weeks and months ahead. My dear ones, the angels are with you now, and they are bringing forward soothing and loving energy to help you rest and replenish. So allow your breath to grow deep and allow your body to relax. And your angels are watching over you. You are a beautiful blessing in this world, and we are so grateful for the gift of you. And now, while you drift off, I'm going to read you a story. And tonight, we return to the second installment of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And I was guided to read this book because the first 2 chapters are about their Christmas experience. And as I record this and as this episode is released, we are in the Christmas week. So at this part of the story, the March sisters and their friends, they have gathered together, and it is Christmas night. And the women, the little women, are putting on a play for their friends. There's quite a lot of narrative and description of their play, but I'm going to skip ahead to more of the narrative of the story, and here is where we will begin. So this is the part where Hannah, who helps in their home, appears and invites all the ladies assembled to walk down to supper. This was a surprise even to the actors, and when they saw the table, they looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Marmee to get up a little treat for them, but anything so fine as this was unheard of since the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and cake and fruit and distracting French bonbons. And in the middle of the table, 4 great bouquets of hothouse flowers. It quite took their breath away, and they stared first at the table and then at their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. "Is it fairies?" asked Amy. "Santa Claus," said Beth. Mother did it, and Meg smiled her sweetest in spite of her gray beard and white eyebrows. Aunt March had a good fit and sent the supper, cried Joe with a sudden inspiration. All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it, replied Mrs. March. The Lawrence boy's grandfather? What in the world would put such a thing into his head? We don't know him, exclaimed Meg. Hannah told one of his servants about your breakfast party. He is an odd old gentleman, but that pleased him. He knew my father years ago and sent me a polite note this afternoon saying he hoped I would allow him to express his friendly feeling toward my children by sending them a few trifles in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast at night to make up for the bread and milk breakfast. That boy put it into his head. I know he did. He's a capital fellow, and I wish we could get acquainted. He looks as if he'd like to know us, but he's bashful. And Meg is so prim, she won't let me speak to him when we pass, said Joe, as the plates went around, and the ice began to melt out of sight with ohs and ahs of satisfaction. You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you? Asked one of the girls. My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence, but says he's very proud and doesn't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding or walking with his tutor and makes him study very hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though he never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once, and he brought her back, and we talked over the fence, and were getting on capitally all about cricket and so on, when he saw Meg coming and walked off. I mean to know him some day, for he needs fun. I'm sure he does, said Joe decidedly. I like his manners, and he looks like a little gentleman, so I've no objection to your knowing him if a proper opportunity comes. He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him in if I had been more sure of what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic and evidently having none of his own. It's a mercy you didn't, Mother, laughed Joe, looking at her boots. But we'll have another play sometime that he can see. Perhaps he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly? I've never had such a fine bouquet before. How pretty it is. And Meg examined her flowers with great interest. They are lovely, but Beth's roses are much sweeter to me, said Mrs. March, smelling the half-dead posy in her belt. Beth nestled up to her and whispered softly, I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having such a Merry Christmas as we are. Chapter 3, The Lawrence Boy. Joe, Joe, where are you? Cried Meg at the foot of the garret stairs. Here, answered a husky voice from above, and running up, Meg found her sister eating apples and crying over the heir of Redcliffe wrapped up in a comforter on an old three-legged sofa by the sunny window. This was Joe's favorite refuge, and here she loved to retire with a half a dozen russets and a nice book to enjoy the quiet and the society of a pet rat who lived nearby and didn't mind her a particle. As men appeared, Scrabble whisked into his hole. Joe shook the tears off her cheeks and waited to hear the news. Such fun, only see. A regular note of invitation from Mrs. Gardiner for tomorrow night, cried Meg, waving the precious paper and then proceeding to read it with a girlish delight. Mrs. Gardiner would be happy to see Miss March and Miss Josephine at a little dance on New Year's Eve. Marmee is willing we should go. Now what shall we wear? What's the use of asking that when you know we shall wear our poplins because we haven't got anything else, answered Jo with her mouth full. If only I had a silk, sighed Meg. Mother says I may when I'm 18 perhaps, but 2 years is an everlasting time to wait. I'm sure our pops look like silk, and they are nice enough for us. Yours is as good as new, but I forgot the burn and the tear in mine. Whatever shall I do? The burn shows badly, and I can't take any out. You must sit still all you can and keep your back out of sight. The front is all right. I shall have a new ribbon for my hair, and Marmee will lend me her little pearl pin, and my new slippers are lovely, and my gloves will do, though they aren't as nice as I'd like. Mine are spoiled with lemonade, and I can't get any new ones, so I shall have to go without, said Jo, who never troubled herself much about dress. You must have gloves or I won't go, cried Meg decidedly. Gloves are more important than anything else. You can't dance without them, and if you don't, I should be so mortified. Then I'll stay still. I don't care much for company dancing. It's no fun to go sailing around. I like to fly about and cut capers. You can't ask Mother for new ones. They are so expensive, and you are so careless. She said when you spoiled the others that she shouldn't get you any more this winter. Can you make them do? I can hold them crumpled up in my hand so no one will know how stained they are. That's all I can do. No, I'll tell you how we can manage. Each wear one good one and carry a bad one. Don't you see? Your hands are bigger than mine and you will stretch my glove dreadfully, began Meg, whose gloves were a tender point with her. Then I'll go without. I don't care what people say, cried Jo, taking up her book. You may have it, you may, only don't stain it and do behave nicely. Don't put your hands behind you or stare or say Christopher Columbus, will you? Don't worry about me. I'll be as prim as I can and not get into any scrapes if I can help it. Now go and answer your note and let me finish this splendid story. So Meg went away to accept with thanks, look over her dress, and sing blithely as she did up her one real lace frill, while Jo finished her story, her 4 apples, and had a game of romps with Scrabble. On New Year's Eve, the parlor was deserted, for the 2 younger girls played dressing maids and the 2 elder were absorbed in the all-important business of getting ready for the party. Simple as the toilets were, there was a great deal of running up and down, laughing and talking, and at one time a strong smell of burned hair pervaded the house. Meg wanted a few curls about her face, and Jo undertook to pinch the papered locks with a pair of hot tongs. Ought they to smoke like that? Asked Beth from her perch on the bed. It's the dampness drying, replied Jo. What a queer smell. It's like burned feathers, observed Amy, smoothing her own pretty curls with a superior air. There now, I'll take off the papers and you'll see a cloud of little ringlets, said Jo, putting down the tongs. She did take off the papers, but no cloud of ringlets appeared, for the hair came off with the papers, and the horrified hairdresser laid a row of little scorched bundles on the bureau before her victim. Oh, what have you done? I'm spoiled. I can't go. My hair, oh, my hair, wailed Meg, looking with despair at the uneven frizzle on her forehead. Just my luck. You shouldn't have asked me to do it. I always spoil everything. I'm so sorry, but the tongs were too hot, and so I've made a mess, groaned poor Joe, regarding the little black pancakes with tears of regret. It isn't spoiled, just frizzle it and tie your ribbon so the ends come back on your forehead a bit, and it will look like the latest fashion. I've seen so many girls do it so, said Amy consolingly. Serves me right for trying to be fine. I wish I'd let my hair alone, cried Meg petulantly. So do I. It was so smooth and pretty. But it will soon grow out again, said Beth, coming to kiss and comfort the shorn sheep. After various lesser mishaps, Meg was finished at last, and by the united exertions of the entire family, Joe's hair was got up and her dress on. They looked very well in their simple suits, Meg's in silver drab, with a blue velvet snood, lace frills, and the pearl pin. Joe in maroon, with a stiff, gentlemanly linen collar and a white chrysanthemum or two for her only ornament. Each put on one nice light glove and carried one soiled one, and all pronounced the effect quite easy and fine. Meg's high-heeled slippers were very tight and hurt her, though she would not own it, and Joe's 19 hairpins all seemed stuck straight into her head, which was not exactly comfortable, but dear me, let us be elegant or die. Have a good time, dearies, said Mrs. March, as the sisters went daintily down the walk. Don't eat much supper, and come away at 11 when I send Hannah for you. As the gate clashed behind them, a voice cried from a window, Girls, girls, have you both got nice pocket handkerchiefs? Yes, yes, spandy nice, and Meg has cologne on hers, cried Joe, adding with a laugh as they went on, I do believe Marmee would ask that if we were all running away from an earthquake. It's one of her aristocratic tastes and quite proper, for a real lady is always known by neat boots, gloves, and handkerchief, replied Meg, who had a good many little aristocratic tastes of her own. Now don't forget to keep the bad breath out of sight, Joe. Is my sash right, and does my hair look very bad? Said Meg as she turned from the glass in Mrs. Gardiner's dressing room. I know I shall forget. If you see me do anything wrong, just remind me by a wink, will you? Returned Joe, giving her collar a twitch and her head a hasty brush. No, winking isn't ladylike. I'll lift my eyebrows if anything is wrong, and nod at you if you are all right. Now hold your shoulders straight and take short steps, and don't shake hands if you are introduced to anyone. It isn't the thing. How do you learn all the proper ways? I never can. Isn't that music lovely? Down they went, feeling a trifle timid, for they seldom went to parties, and as informal as this little gathering was, it was an event to them. Mrs. Gardiner, a stately old lady, greeted them kindly and handed them over to the eldest of her 6 daughters. Meg knew Sally and was at ease very soon, but Jo, who didn't care much for girls or girlish gossip, stood about, with her back carefully against the wall, and felt as much out of her place as a colt in a flower garden. Half a dozen jovial lads were talking about skates in another part of the room, and she longed to go and join them, for skating was one of the joys of her life. She telegraphed her wish to Meg, but the eyebrows went up so alarmingly that she dared not stir. No one came to talk to her, and one by one the group dwindled away until she was left alone. She could not roam about and amuse herself, for the burned breath would show. So she stared at people rather forlornly till the dancing began. Meg was asked at once, and the tight slippers tripped about so briskly that none would have guessed the pain their wearer suffered smilingly. Jo saw a big red-headed youth approaching her corner and feared he meant to engage her. She slipped into a curtained recess, intending to peep and enjoy herself in peace. Unfortunately, another bashful person had chosen the same refuge, for as the curtain fell behind her, she found herself face to face with the Lawrence boy. "Dear me, I didn't know anyone was here," stammered Jo, preparing to back out as speedily as she had bounced in. But the boy laughed and said pleasantly, though he looked a little startled, "Don't mind me, stay if you like." "Shan't I disturb you?" "Not a bit. I only came here because I don't know many people and felt rather strange at first, you know." "So did I. Don't go away, please, unless you'd rather." The boy sat down again and looked at his pumps till Jo said, trying to be polite and easy, "I think I've had the pleasure of seeing you before. You live near us, don't you?" "Next door." And he looked up and laughed outright, for Jo's prim manner was rather funny when he remembered how they had chatted about cricket when he brought the cat home. That put Jo at her ease, and she laughed too as she said, in her heartiest way, "We did have such a good time over your nice Christmas present. Grandpa sent it. But you put it in his head, didn't you now?" "How is your cat, Miss March?" asked the boy, trying to look sober while his black eyes shone with fun. "Nicely, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. But I am not Miss March. I am only Jo," returned the young lady. "Well, I am not Mr. Lawrence. I am only Laurie." "Laurie Lawrence, what an odd name." "My first name is Theodore, but I don't like it, for the fellows call me Dora, so I made them say Laurie instead. I hate my name too, so sentimental. I wish everyone would say Jo instead of Josephine. How did you make the boys stop calling you Dora?" "I thrashed them." "Well, I can't thrash Aunt March, so I suppose I shall have to bear it." And Jo resigned herself with a sigh. "Don't you like to dance, Miss Jo?" asked Laurie, looking as if he thought the name suited her. "I like it well enough if there's plenty of room and everyone is lively. In a place like this, I'm sure to upset something, tread on people's toes, or do something dreadful, so I keep out of mischief and let Meg sail about. Don't you dance?" "Sometimes. You see, I've been abroad a good many years and haven't been in the company enough yet to know how you do things here." "Abroad?" cried Jo. "Oh, tell me about it. I love dearly to hear people describe their travels." Laurie didn't seem to know where to begin, but Jo's eager questions soon sent him going, and he told her how he had been at school in Vevey, where boys never wore hats and had fleets of boats on the lake, and for holiday fun went on walking trips about Switzerland with their teachers. "Don't I wish I'd been there," cried Jo. "Did you go to Paris?" "Well, we spent last winter there." "Can you talk French?" "We were not allowed to speak anything else at Vevey." "Do say some. I can read it, but I can't pronounce." And then Laurie says something to her in French. "How nicely you do it. Let me see, you said, 'Who is the young lady in the pretty slippers?' Didn't you?" Oui, mademoiselle. It's my sister Margaret, and you knew it was. Do you think she's pretty? Yes, she makes me think of the German girls. She looks so fresh and quiet and dances like a lady. Jo quite glowed with pleasure at this boyish praise of her sister and stored it up to repeat to Meg. Both peeped and criticized and chatted till they felt like old acquaintances. Laurie's bashfulness soon wore off, and Jo's gentlemanly demeanor amused and set him at his ease. And Jo was her merry self again because her dress was forgotten and nobody lifted their eyebrows at her. She liked the Lawrence boy better than ever and took several good looks at him so that she might describe him to the girls, for they had no brothers, very few male cousins, and boys were almost unknown creatures to them. Curly black hair, brown skin, big black eyes, handsome nose, fine teeth, small hands and feet, taller than I am, very polite for a boy, and altogether jolly. I wonder how old he is. It was on the tip of Jo's tongue to ask, but she checked herself in time, and with unusual tact, tried to find out in a roundabout way. I suppose you are going to college soon. I see you pegging away at your books. No, I mean studying hard, and Jo blushed at the dreadful pegging which had escaped her. Laurie smiled, but didn't seem shocked, and answered with a shrug. Not for a year or two. I won't go before 17 anyway. Aren't you but 15? Asked Jo, looking at the tall lad whom she had imagined 17 already. 16 next month. Oh, how I wished I was going to college. You don't look as if you liked it. I hate it. Nothing but grinding or skylarking. And I don't like the way fellows do either in this country. What do you like? To live in Italy and to enjoy myself in my own way. Jo wanted very much to ask what his own way was, but his black brows looked rather threatening as he knit them, so she changed the subject by saying, as her foot kept time, "That's a splendid polka. Why don't you go and try it?" "If you will come too," he answered with a gallant little bow. "I can't, for I told Meg I wouldn't because, and there Jo stopped and looked undecided whether to tell or to laugh. "Because what? You won't tell?" "Never." "Well, I have a bad trick of standing before the fire, and so I burned my frocks, and I scorched this one, and though it's nicely mended, it shows, and Meg told me to keep still so no one would see it. You may laugh if you want to, it's funny, I know." But Laurie didn't laugh. He only looked down a minute, and the expression of his face puzzled Jo when he said very gently, "Never mind that. I'll tell you how we can manage. There's a long hall out there, and we can dance grandly, and no one will see us. Please come." Jo thanked him and gladly went, wishing she had 2 neat gloves when she saw the nice pearl-colored ones her partner wore. The hall was empty, and they had a grand polka, for Laurie danced well, and taught her the German step, which delighted Jo, being full of swing and spring. When the music stopped, they sat down on the stairs to catch their breath, and Laurie was in the midst of an account of a students' festival at Heidelberg when Meg appeared in search of her sister. She beckoned, and Jo reluctantly followed her into a side room, where she found her on a sofa, holding her foot and looking pale. "I've sprained my ankle. That stupid high heel turned and gave me a sad wrench. It aches so, and I can hardly stand, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get home, she said, rocking to and fro in pain. I knew you'd hurt your feet with those silly shoes. I'm sorry, but I don't see what you can do except get a carriage or stay here all night, answered Joe softly, rubbing the poor ankle as she spoke. I can't have a carriage without its costing ever so much. I dare say I can't get one at all, for most people come in their own, and it's a long way to the stable and no one to send. Well, I'll go. No, indeed, it's past 9 and dark as Egypt. I can't stop here, for the house is full. Sally has some girls staying with her. I'll rest till Hannah comes and then do the best I can. I'll ask Laurie. He will go, said Joe, looking relieved as the idea occurred to her. Mercy, no, don't ask or tell anyone. Get me my rubbers and put these slippers with our things. I can't dance any more, but as soon as supper is over, watch for Hannah and tell me the minute she comes. They are going out to supper now. I'll stay with you, I'd rather. No, dear, run along and bring me some coffee. I am so tired I can't stir. So Meg reclined with rubbers well hidden, and Joe went blundering away to the dining room, which she found after going into a china closet and opening the door of a room where old Mr. Gardiner was taking a little private refreshment. Making a dart at the table, she secured the coffee, which immediately spilled, thereby making the front of her dress as bad as the back. Oh dear, what a blunderbuss I am, exclaimed Joe, finishing Meg's glove by scrubbing her gown with it. Can I help you? Said a friendly voice, and there was Laurie with a full cup in one hand and a plate of ice in the other. I was trying to get something for Meg, who is very tired, and someone shook me, and here I am in a nice state, answered Joe, glancing dismally from the stained skirt to the coffee-colored glove. Too bad. I was looking for someone to give this to. May I take it to your sister? Oh, thank you. I'll show you where she is. I don't offer to take it myself, for I should only get into another scrape if I did. Joe led the way, and as if used to waiting on ladies, Laurie drew up a little table, brought a second installment of coffee and ice for Joe, and was so obliging that even particular Meg pronounced him a nice boy. They had a merry time over the bonbons and the mottos, and were in the midst of a quiet game of buzz with 2 or 3 other young people who had strayed in, when Hannah appeared. Meg forgot her foot and rose so quickly that she was forced to catch hold of Joe with an exclamation of pain. Hush, don't say anything, she whispered, adding aloud, It's nothing, I turned my foot a little, that's all, and limped upstairs to put on her things. Hannah scolded, Meg cried, and Joe was at her wit's end, till she decided to take things into her own hands. Slipping out, she ran down and, finding a servant, asked if he could go get her a carriage. It happened to be a hired waiter who knew nothing about the neighborhood, and Joe was looking round for help when Laurie, who had heard what she said, came up and offered his grandfather's carriage, which had just come for him, he said. It's so early, you can't mean to go yet, began Joe, looking relieved but hesitating to accept the offer. I always go early, I do truly. Please let me take you home. It's all on my way, you know, and it rains, they say. That settled it, and telling him of Meg's mishap, Joe gratefully accepted and rushed up to bring down the rest of the party. Hannah hated rain as much as a cat does, so she made no trouble, and they rolled away in the luxurious close carriage, feeling very festive and elegant. Lori went on the box so Meg could keep her foot up, and the girls talked over their party and freedom. "I had a capital time, did you?" asked Jo, rumpling up her hair and making herself comfortable. "Yes, till I hurt myself. Sally's friend Annie Moffat took a fancy to me and asked me to come and spend a week with her when Sally does. She's going in the spring when the opera comes, and it will be perfectly splendid if Mother only lets me go," answered Meg, cheering up at the thought. "I saw you dancing with the red-headed man I ran from. Was he nice?" "Oh, very. His hair is auburn, not red, and he was very polite, and I had a delicious dance with him. He looked like a grasshopper in a fit when he did the new step. Lori and I couldn't help laughing. Did you hear us?" "No, but it was very rude. What were you about all that time hidden away in there?" Jo told her adventures, and by the time she had finished, they were at home. With many thanks, they said good night and crept in, hoping to disturb no one. But the instant their door creaked, 2 little nightcaps bobbed up, and 2 sleepy but eager voices cried out, "Tell us about the party! Tell us about the party!" With what Meg called a great want of manners, Jo had saved some bonbons for the little girls, and they soon subsided after hearing the most thrilling events of the evening. I declare, it really seems like being a fine young lady to come home from the party in a carriage and sit in my dressing gown with a maid to wait on me, said Meg, as Jo bounded up her foot with arnica and brushed her hair. I don't believe fine young ladies enjoy themselves a bit more than we do, in spite of our burned hair, old gowns, 1 glove apiece, and tight slippers that sprain our ankles when we are silly enough to wear them. And I think Jo was quite right. Chapter 4, Burdens. Oh dear, how hard it does seem to take up our packs and go on, sighed Meg, the morning after the party, for now the holidays were over. The week of merrymaking did not fit her for going uneasily with the tasks she never liked. "I wish it was Christmas or New Year's all the time. Wouldn't it be fun?" answered Jo, yawning dismally. "We shouldn't enjoy ourselves half as much as we do now, but it does seem so nice to have little suppers and bouquets and go to parties and drive home and read and rest and not work. It's like other people, you know, and I always envy girls who do such things. I'm so fond of luxury," said Meg, trying to decide which of the 2 shabby gowns was the least shabby. "Well, we can't have it, so don't let us grumble, but shoulder our bundles and trudge along as cheerfully as Marmee does. I'm sure Aunt March is a regular old man of the sea to me, but I suppose when I've learned to carry her without complaining, she will tumble off or get so light that I shan't mind her." This idea tickled Jo's fancy and put her in good spirits, but Meg didn't brighten, for her burden consisted of 4 spoiled children, seemed heavier than ever. She had not heart enough even to make herself pretty as usual by putting on a blue neck ribbon and dressing her hair in the most becoming way. "Where's the use of looking nice when no one sees me but those cross children, and no one cares whether I'm pretty or not," she muttered, shutting her drawer with a jerk. "I shall have to toil and moil all my days, with only little bits of fun now and then, and get old and ugly and sour because I'm poor and can't enjoy my life as other girls do. It's a shame." So Meg went down wearing an injured look and wasn't at all agreeable at breakfast time. Everyone seemed rather out of sorts and inclined to croak. Beth had a headache and lay on the sofa trying to comfort herself with the cat and 3 kittens. Amy was fretting because her lessons were not learned and she couldn't find her rubbers. Joe would whistle and make a great racket getting ready. Mrs. March was very busy trying to finish a letter which must go at once, and Hannah had the grumps for being up late didn't suit her. There never was such a cross family, cried Joe, losing her temper when she had upset an inkstand, broken both bootlaces, and sat down upon her hat. Well, you're the crossest person in it, returned Amy, washing out the sum that was all wrong with the tears that had fallen on her slate. Beth, if you don't keep these horrid cats down cellar, I'll have them disowned, exclaimed Meg angrily as she tried to get rid of the kitten, which had scrambled up her back and stuck like a burr just out of reach. Joe laughed, Meg scolded, Beth implored, and Amy wailed because she couldn't remember how much 9 times 12 was. Girls, do be quiet 1 minute. I must get this off in the early mail, and you drive me distracted with your worry, cried Mrs. March, crossing out the 3rd spoiled sentence in her letter. There was a momentary lull, broken by Hannah, who stalked in, laid 2 hot turnovers on the table, and stalked out again. These turnovers were an institution, and the girls called them muffs, for they had no others, and found the hot pies very comforting to their hands on cold mornings. Hannah never forgot to make them, no matter how busy or grumpy she might be, for the walk was long and bleak. The poor things got no other lunch and were seldom home before 2. Cuddle your cats and get over your headache, Bethy. Goodbye, Marmee. We are a set of rascals this morning, but we'll come home regular angels. Now then, Meg. And Joe tramped away, feeling that the pilgrims were not setting out as they ought to do. They always looked back before turning the corner, for their mother was always at the window to nod and smile and wave her hand to them. Somehow it seemed as if they couldn't have gotten through the day without that, for whatever their mood might be, the last glimpse of that motherly face was sure to affect them like sunshine. If Marmee shook her fist instead of kissing her hand to us, it would serve us right, for more ungrateful wretches than we are were never seen, cried Joe, taking remorseful satisfaction in the snowy walk and bitter wind. Don't use such dreadful expressions, replied Meg from the depths of the veil in which she had shrouded herself like a nun sick of the world. I like good strong words that mean something, replied Joe, catching her hat as it took a leap off her head, preparatory to flying away altogether. Call yourself any names you like, but I am neither a rascal nor a wretch, and I don't choose to be called so. You're a blighted being and decidedly cross because you can't sit in the lap of luxury all the time. Poor dear, just wait till I make my fortune, and you shall revel in carriages and ice cream and high-heeled slippers and posies and red-headed boys to dance with. How ridiculous you are, Joe, but Meg laughed at the nonsense and felt better in spite of herself. Lucky for you I am, for if I put on crushed airs and tried to be dismal as you do, we should be in a nice state. Thank goodness I can always find something funny to keep me up. Don't croak any more, but come home jolly. There's a dear. Jo gave her sister an encouraging pat on the shoulder as they parted for the day, each going a different way, each hugging her little warm turnover and trying to be cheerful in spite of wintry weather, hard work, and the unsatisfied desires of pleasure-loving youth. When Mr. March lost his property in trying to help an unfortunate friend, the two oldest girls begged to be allowed to do something toward their own support at least, believing they could not begin too early to cultivate energy, industry, and independence. Their parents consented, and both fell to work with the hearty goodwill which, in spite of all obstacles, is sure to succeed at last. Margaret found a place as nursery governess and felt rich with her small salary. As she said, she was fond of luxury, and her chief trouble was poverty. She found it harder to bear than the others because she could remember a time when home was beautiful, life full of ease and pleasure, and want of any kind unknown. She tried not to be envious or discontented, but it was very natural that the young girl should long for pretty things, bright friends, accomplishments, and a happy life. At the King's, she daily saw all she wanted, for the children's older sisters were just out, and Meg caught frequent glimpses of dainty ball dresses and bouquets, heard lively gossip about theaters, concerts, sleighing parties, and merrymakings of all kinds, and saw money lavished on trifles which would have been so precious to her. Poor Meg seldom complained, but a sense of injustice made her feel bitter toward everyone sometimes, for she had not yet learned to know how rich she was in the blessings which alone can make life happy. Jo happened to suit Aunt March, who was lame and needed an active person to wait upon her. The childless old lady had offered to adopt one of the girls when the troubles came, and was much offended because her offer was declined. Other friends told the Marches that they had lost all chance of being remembered in the rich old lady's will, but the unworldly Marches only said, "We can't give up our girls for a dozen fortunes. Rich or poor, we will keep together and be happy in one another." The old lady wouldn't speak to them for a time, but happening to meet Jo at a friend's, something in her comical face and blunt manners struck the old lady's fancy, and she proposed to take her for a companion. This did not suit Jo at all, but she accepted the place since nothing better appeared, and to everyone's surprise got on remarkably well with her irascible relative. There was an occasional tempest, and once Jo marched home, declaring she couldn't bear it longer, but Aunt March always cleared up quickly and sent for her to come back, and with such urgency that she could not refuse, for in her heart she rather liked the peppery old lady. And with that, my beautiful friends, the angels and I wish you a good rest. Remember, you are loved, and you are a blessing, and we are so deeply grateful for our time with you. Be well, my friends, and we'll meet up again soon.